In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. I am very excited to speak with today's guest. He is a distinguished leader in industrial automation who brings over 30 years of industry experience and is known for leading major business transformations on both the buyer and supplier side of automation. From driving billions in purchasing at General Motors to overseeing global automation deployments at Amazon. He successfully scaled multiple businesses, which we'll talk about today, and he joined the board of his current firm, Acieta, in early 2024. And after a brief, I would say maybe failed retirement, was asked to take on the role of CEO, which he did earlier this year. The company delivers advanced robotics and automation systems with a focus on warehousing and logistics and helps manufacturers modernize faster and compete smarter in today's economy. Craig Ulrich, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Nice to be here.
I'm very glad to have you. And Craig, when we previously spoke, we had talked about some of the orgs that you had joined, including one in particular where you grew warehousing automation from just a few million in revenue up to 80 million, which is, of course, a huge shift and a tremendous accomplishment. So I'd love if you can take us inside that transformation and just dig into, how did you do that? What lessons did you carry forward from that experience that others would benefit from hearing? And maybe let's start first by talking about, what helped set you up for success when you were coming into that role.
Yeah, perfect. So I think, that was with JR Automation, the particular instance of driving transformation. But I think I went through that once before that as well with a company called ESIS Automation. And JR purchased ESIS in 2018. I joined ESIS in 2013. And the first transformation, I think, was where I learned the most was going into ESIS. They were small automation. They were looking for growing their business 2 times, right? They wanted to double their size, and really they were looking to sell. The owners were looking to sell out to a larger automation company, which they ultimately did. And I helped them to grow that business, from probably 20 million to about 40 million. I was one of the cogs in there, but really, there, in order to grow, we really needed to start to look at other areas within automation and start to think about how do we provide automation into those areas, and we didn't really have any experience with it, and that's while it sounds easy, just pick a area to go work in, but there's a lot of effort that has to go into that. You need some experience, even though all automation is sort of similar. It doesn't matter what vertical you're working in, whether you're working in warehousing or automotive or transportation or some other industry. They're similar. All the concepts are similar for moving parts and assembling parts, but people want you to have experience in their vertical. So first thing is go find some experienced people, right? While I felt like I had that experience, I wanted to have salespeople that were very comfortable in that space, and also some application engineers that could actually do a nice job with customers and quote well. So, really grew an organization that was able to do powertrain and a lot of plastics type of work, a lot of plastics joining and plastics cutting and things like that, and really no experience at all in that field. But it looked like it was a great place to be, a great space. Looked like we could grow the company, and we did. We probably there were 2 divisions in ESIS. Mine was very small, 5 million of 20, but we grew that 5 to about 16 million, to so, tripled its size, which was pretty good. And it really it taught me how to go in and talk to customers that really, they're looking for experience. How do you show that experience when you don't have any, right? And
Yep.
and so it was good. So then, that kind of helped me as JR purchased ESIS. They were also doing work in the warehouse automation space, which we really didn't have a lot of experience with. But um, but again, being able to go in and confidently talk with these people and also hire the right people that understood the business, right? So we called him a chief engineer, but he was really highly respected within the industry. We brought him in, and then it was just hard work, right? Just going and meeting with people from UPS and FedEx and Amazon and Walmart and all these companies, and really just nose to the grindstone, um, working with them, showing them what we're capable of, getting small jobs, then showing those off to everyone else. Hey, look, we do have this experience. We did these 3, 4 small jobs, the momentum. It's like a flywheel. Once it starts, it just keeps going, right? And we grew that. I think when I started there, 2018, we were probably doing about 2 million in warehouse automation. By 2021, we were doing probably 80 million in warehouse automation robotics. So it was quite the expansion in JR.
Yeah, it's very impressive. I want to take maybe a few steps back because it sounds like multiple times you were entering kind of new market segments that you hadn't been operating in before. Can you talk a little bit about like how do you go about choosing which market segments?
Actually, quite good. So I'll go back to ESIS and really, we're looking at data. We're looking at automation data from company. At that time, it was called RIA. Now it's called A3. But A3 comes out with just tons of data every year on where markets are expanding and what they're doing. The reason we picked powertrain at first was a lot of 9 and 10 speed transmissions were being developed. They really needed to get fuel standards. EVs were kind of, nobody was even talking about EVs in 2013, 2014. They were talking about how are we going to get more out of what we have, out of 4-cylinder engines, out of 9-speed and 10-speed transmissions. And so we really went after a lot of the 9-speed, 10-speed transmission evolution that was taking place at that time. So that was that, and just looking at data, right? Where are we going to attack? What markets do we want to attack? That looked really good at that time. That later spurred EVs. I won't say that I was a big portion of JR's expansion into EVs. They had a lot of people that were doing that, but certainly, they JR attacked EVs in the same way as we attacked 9-speed and 10-speed transmissions and higher efficiency 4-cylinders. And then on the plastic side, really, we were looking at, there are just tons of plastic inside of a vehicle, right? And so I was located in Detroit, so that was our main area. But if you look at plastic in general, it's everywhere, and there's a lot of automation. There's a lot of joining methods for plastic. There's a lot of different products out there that actually get a little bit of automation that aren't automotive. And so we were trying to think, we were 100% automotive. How could we expand outside of automotive? How could we expand the business? And it seemed like getting into that plastics first, because we already had relationships within automotive. We were able to talk to a couple different automotive companies and get work within those automotive companies in the plastic joining area. But then later, able to try to expand outside of automotive with other companies that were doing work with plastic. So that was ESIS in JR, um, you know, warehouse automation. If you look at the number of people that are in a warehouse, it is astronomical. And I did do a short stint between ESIS and JR. I did a year and a half at Amazon, and the amount of turnover at Amazon is incredible. They probably turn over. There's probably a couple thousand people working in an Amazon warehouse fulfillment center, and they probably turn that over every 3 years. So they're turning over 3,000 people. They're hiring constantly. People are quitting constantly, and it's true for everybody. I don't mean to pick on Amazon, and it's not because it's a great company, but you go to any warehouse and um, it's hard work. It's hard backbreaking work. You're picking things up all day long, putting them down. No human being should pick things up and put them down. It really, that should be a robotic application. And so, uh, just every warehouse out there was trying to figure out how do we automate and eliminate some of these backbreaking jobs and not have to have so much turnover. So that was a pretty easy one to go after. And it continues. I think warehouse automation is probably the biggest area for growth in automation um, today. Even the 2018 we started, but even today, I think that's probably where most of the growth in automation is going to take place.
Yeah. I mean, you touch on a lot of the areas that, in my marketing firm, when we're working with clients and talking executives through kind of choosing new market segments to expand into, like there is a method to the madness. It's not just gut, there's like the art and science
Oh,
of
no,
it.
it is. Looking at data, lots of data. A3 is a great source of that data, but millions of other areas to look at as well, right? We were looking at even just reading Forbes magazine and things like that, right? You're going to pick up a lot of information. So you're studying all the time. Where do we need to be functioning, and how do we need to function in that area?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Right. The market trends, the market size, like you talked about some adjacencies to kind of what you were already doing, which obviously makes it a bit easier, making sure you can serve them profitably. So all this kind of analysis, and then sounds like that boded very well for you.
Yes, for sure.
Curious to hear a bit more about your customers. And podcast talks a lot about transformation. We've talked about some of the company transformations that you've led. Can you talk about the biggest transformations or that your customers are undergoing, and kind of what's most important to kind of understand or kind of work with them through that?
I mean, from the automotive perspective, the biggest transformation we see was going to EV, and then what what that did to companies, and then the fact that they had to pull back. Maybe they went a little too early. Uh, Um, I think maybe that's a lesson of really maybe studying a little bit more and understanding. Certainly, infrastructure was a big deal for why EVs didn't take off. So maybe as you're going down those paths, you need to be looking at is are all the right things going to be in place for this transformation to take place? And eventually we're probably all going to be electric cars eventually, but you had a whole infrastructure built around gasoline and refineries and oil and all the things that were already in place, and then to replace them. Um, and to do it quickly as everybody wanted that to happen, was probably a pipe dream, to be able to make that kind of transformation in that kind of speed. I think the transformation is going to happen, but certainly not at that speed. And I think that it certainly hurt some of our customers to to put all that money into that into that ability to change and then find out, oh boy, people really don't want these things as much as we thought they were going to want them. And mainly, I think, because of the lack of infrastructure out there. So, yeah, that would be maybe one of the bigger transformations. I think the transformation in warehousing to go to automation, um, isn't happening as fast as I thought that would happen. There are there's there are companies out there that are doing, mm, driverless fork trucks, and you go into a warehouse and there's hundreds of fork trucks driving around, and it can be dangerous, because people are thinking about other things during the day, right? They're not just thinking about work. They're thinking about their kids, or they're thinking about their parents, or there's other thoughts that are going through their brain, and they lose focus periodically, and that's when accidents happen. And there's some really bad accidents that occur with fork trucks. And so, like, in 2017, 2018, we started to put in some driverless fork trucks into Amazon, and I really thought that was gonna be I thought that industry would completely change with driverless fork trucks, but yet it hasn't. That transformation isn't occurring. I think because of ROI. It's you already own this whole fleet of fork trucks, and then you have people that are already driving those fork trucks. So replacing them with driverless fork trucks, where you have to buy those now, and you already bought fork trucks. Mm, I think that's the reason why that transformation is not taking place. Um, but I would have thought that would have happened way faster in that space.
Yeah. Well, I think we see that in other places, like the tech investor Mark Andreessen says, being too early is the same as being wrong.
Yeah.
And right, it's unfortunate because if you're a visionary, you might see things that others don't see yet. But it's kind of hard to build a business around that. And the change management, both your internal team, like you talked about the infrastructure. There's just the customers. There's just so many different kind of components to kind of right place at the right time.
Yeah, there really are. It's um, I again, it's going to happen. That whole space is going to get automated, uh, but it's just taking way longer than I expected.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, this is Natalie, your Shift and Thrive host. After chatting with lots of CEOs, one thing is crystal clear. Leveling up your company means having a killer go-to-market strategy. That's what my crew at Magnitude Consulting does every day. If you're trying to step up your marketing game, whether it's strategizing, accelerating your pipeline, expanding into new markets, or getting into AI and automation, let's talk. No pitch, no pressure, just good conversation. Visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com/Natalie to schedule a time. Can't wait to connect. Craig, I want to shift gears a bit and talk a little bit more about you as the leader. When we had previously spoken, you described yourself as a servant leader. So I'd love to hear, how that perspective formed for you and just kind of how that shows up in your day to day.
Yeah, I mean, those things form early in your life, right? And as early on, I worked for leaders that were very supportive, always looking to they wanted you to go off and do the work yourself, right? But they were always saying, how can I help, and where can I help, and is there roadblocks that I can knock down for you? And they did those things, right? And it made me really, really successful, which made them very successful. And that's the way I look at it. My success isn't about me. My success is about the people that work for me. If they're all successful, then I'm successful. I don't need to go off and do things on my own. I need my team to go off and do these things for me. And so I need to make them successful. And that's where the servant leadership comes in, where, I always look at an organization as, most org charts look like this, right? CEO on top and everybody down below. I think of it as I'm at the bottom. My job is to support all these people that are above me, And same thing. I mean, I preach it with my team as well, right? So the whole C-suite, your job is to support everybody above you because that's how we're going to be successful as an organization, not because I have the smartest C-suite and I'm the smartest guy. I'm far from the smartest guy. I think what makes me smart is go support those people, go make them successful, and then you'll be successful.
Curious to hear, what do you do when there's a leader or manager in your org that kind of doesn't ascribe to that and either kind of has the ego that wants to make themselves look good, isn't good at promoting their own team? Like, do you find they're ultimately just not a fit for your organization, or kind of can you coach and evolve them to
There's
change?
a lot of coaching and teaching, and I think you have to find certain instances and talk through and say, okay, you handled it that way. And can you think of a different way that you could have handled that situation? And so you make sure that, like, right at the situation that you're doing the coaching and teaching, and I think people, I mentioned, early on being shaped by that. I think people will look at you, also see your style, and kind of copy your style. I've had people that don't do that. Usually I coach and teach through it though. I'm not a big, um, I always think you can shape people, and so I'm not a big fire guy where I'm going to fire people because they just don't fit the mold. But I have done that too because they don't fit the mold. So, but I would always take the approach first of coach, teach, mentor, and try to move somebody, towards that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as you were talking, you're making me think of some of the kind of best bosses I had earlier in my career. And there was one woman that, we got to a trade show, something hadn't been prepared that needed to. And she was like, all right, let's stuff bags, stuff the bags we needed for the trade show. And just that mindset of like, we're all in it together,
Oh, God,
had such an
yeah.
impact on me and something I've really carried forward. So I
Yeah.
totally agree.
I
Um,
tell people I'll sweep the floors. Now, typically they'll say, no, 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 no. I got it. I'll make sure it's all clean, but if that's what it takes, I'll go sweep the floors if that's what it takes to make the team successful. Whatever they need, that's really my thought process. Nothing's beneath me. I came up through the ranks. I did work, and I can still do work.
Yeah, curious if you ever felt like kind of friction between, you talked about making the team successful, but like friction between that and what the business needs. So if like your focus needs to be elsewhere based on strategic priorities, but the team needs you in other areas, kind of, I guess, any ways where like servant leadership and helping too much is actually a detriment, and how do you navigate that?
Well, I've had people working for me that think that yes, sometimes I'm too hands-on. I get too much down in the weeds, and I'm working with the team too frequently. I've had some of that feedback. I always say doesn't matter. That's what I'm going to do, right? It's just what I do. But has there been a time where a team needed help and I couldn't help them? Um, I'm sure many times. I'm sure there's only so many priorities that you can make, right? So, that's where you delegate out and ask, others to get engaged. At that point, I might delegate to my CCO or my COO or my HR VP, depending on what the problem is, and say, hey, can you go help that team get on track? And yeah, I do that a lot. I certainly delegate out those responsibilities as well.
For sure. I'm curious to hear if there are any changes that you had to kind of drive that you felt kind of fearful of, or that took more courage than average for you as a
Mhm.
leader? And if so, kind of how did you push through that or work through that?
That's a interesting one. I mean, there's lots of things I've been fearful of. Um, I Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain. He has a pretty cool saying that if it's your job to eat a frog, I suggest you eat it first thing in the morning. If it's your job to eat two frogs, then start with the biggest one, right? And so I think I use that saying all the time. Just go do it, right? Don't put it off. Don't just go do it. And so there's been lots of times. There's lots of things I don't like. Um, it's a tough business, the automation business. Lot you're trying to please a customer, but you're also trying to make money at the same time. And those two things sometimes get in the way of each other. And so there's lots of times when there's things I don't want to do, but I force myself to do them, um, because it's my job to eat a frog. And so I preach that to my people as well. So yeah, I don't, I would say typically I take on every problem that comes at me though.
Yep. I do love the eat the frog. I learned that from a colleague a few years ago, and I often think about that. And it is, if you start your day by eating the frog, the rest of the day feels that much
Exactly.
more fruitful.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a quote. We used to have this as a poster up in our old office, and I recently came across it again. That's, keep your fears to yourself, but share your courage with others. Um, and I think there's elements of that I like, and then there's elements that just don't always quite sit right with me. I
Hmm.
think there's maybe a balance of needing to
Oh, I think so. I talk about fears all the
share your
time.
fears and why, and work through that with your leaders.
Yeah, I think you want feedback on it, right? You're okay. Here's the five things that could go wrong, and what do you think if this happens? What do you think we should do? If this happens, what do you think we should do? You got to have plans, right? So I mean, there again, that it's fear. That doesn't mean you're not going to go fix it, but you certainly want to understand all the pitfalls, and then you wanna kind of have plans for all those different things that could happen, right? And so yeah, I think the best thing you can do is talk about issues. Um, don't I gotta believe that leads to an ulcer if you see talk
Can't
about
hold all of that in forever.
it.
Yeah. Well, and I think especially in times like this where there's so much changing so quickly,
Yeah.
nobody as a leader should be pretending like they have all the answers, right?
Oh
So it's
God.
really about how do you productively work through that with
Yeah,
your
that's why
colleagues.
you have a team working for you, right? You want that team to weigh in on everything.
And speaking of changes going on these days, would love to talk a little bit about AI because I know it is reshaping every industry right now, and in automation it has a lot of promise, maybe has some limitations. Would love to hear just how that's impacting your organization, whether generative AI or just more broadly.
AI, from a vision perspective, we've been using AI and learning methods probably ever since I joined Amazon. That's when I first learned about how AI can be used so that's like 2017. So uh, we've been using it. Automation, at least from a vision perspective, we have been using it, and allowing the system to learn from what it has done, on previous work that it's doing. So a lot of it on pick and place, right? And there's some learning capabilities in there. So in that respect, we have been using AI, for quite some time in the automation industry. Now there's all kinds of promise out there for can robots come up to speed faster, using AI? Probably, um, but I haven't really seen. I mean, there's probably 10 companies. I just had a company present to me on it. There's there's promise there, but it's going to take a little bit of time, um, for that to occur. I think that there's some generative, properties for designs, for electrical design and mechanical design, where we could use AI to help with the grunt work of engineering. There's definitely work to be done there. And here again, I would say I've seen it. I've actually used it in electrical design, where I wouldn't call it AI, but you could fill out a form, and from that form, the engineering designs get developed and built. There's still human input there, and even with AI, there's input, right? Hey, what do you think about this, right? When you're using Grok or something, right? And then Grok answers it. So there's always some human input, and it's not like it's thinking for you. You have to have a little bit of thought there on it. So I think on the mechanical design, electrical design, you're going to see more and more of it being used, and maybe just taking out some of the grunt work that's there. Probably on today, there's checkers that you would do a mechanical design, and then you would send it to a checker, and the checker would make sure everything is okay. Well, that could probably be done with AI over time. So yes, I think AI is going to play a huge part. I think we're already using it quite a bit, um, but it's still in its infancy as well. So I think, ask me that question 5 years from now, and I think it's going to be, heck, we do it in everything. Everything that we do, we use AI somehow, but not today yet.
Yeah. Yep. Um, wanted to maybe hear a little bit about your what I called in the introduction, failed retirement, where you told me you retired and then were asked to come back in and took on what sounds like a
Yeah, they
very
didn't ask actually. I volunteered. Yeah,
okay,
yeah, they
okay.
were they were going to go out on a search um for a CEO, and um again, I the business is hard. It really is. It's a it's a tough industry, and finding people that really have the experience of the industry, but also can lead a company at the same time, is it's hard to find those types of people, right? We had a great leader, but he didn't understand the industry real well. And so, finding somebody that understands the industry super well and can lead the company, uh, tough. And so I volunteered, and so far so good. Certainly, I liked retirement. It was nice, and I always had a goal from a young age. I was a big saver, and always had this goal of retiring early. But also, you after coming out and then sitting on the board, and you're kind of like, man, if I could just get in there a little deeper, I could help so much more, right? But you're on the board of directors, you're not the CEO, you're not the CFO, so you can give advice, and you can, say, did you look at this or try this, or but at the end of the day, you're not really running the company. Um, so yeah, I think after retiring, and then watching from the sides and trying to give advice and help, it was like, no, I like doing it too. So that's
Yeah, sounds like you couldn't help yourself. Had
yeah,
to get back in there.
yeah,
And I know that your retirement wasn't very long, but are there any like perspective shifts that you had just kind of coming back in?
yeah, yeah. I mean, and again, there's a lot of communication, a lot of talking with customers, a lot of, just the fact that I hadn't done that for a year and a half. I was retired for a year and a half almost. Um, yeah, that I was rusty. I was rusty uh, to do that. So I was rusty about eating the frog. I had to figure it out in my archives. And so yeah, I think I think that definitely, very, very quickly you realize, the things that kind of drove you to retirement, you say, "Hmm, wow, those things still exist." So you still got to go tackle them every day, you know.
Grass is
But,
always greener.
yeah, yeah. So it's yeah, it was kind of a good transition. How many people can say they retired for a year and a half and got to go off and do bunch of fun stuff and travel the world and all those types of things for a short period of time and then go back to work again? And I think everybody would love to do that. I think people in their 40s and 30s would love to do that. Take a year off and go enjoy yourself and then come back to work. So, and the fact that I could do it in a really high level, at a really high level, I was a CEO, I retired, and then I came back as a CEO. That that's pretty. It was really quite nice.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds like a great experience. I'm curious to learn a bit more about you kind of in years past. Can you talk a little bit about kind of your childhood and um, how that shaped kind of where ultimately you built your career?
Wow, childhood, I can't even remember anymore. That's a long time ago, but
Okay.
yeah, I think big sports. Not when I was a kid, and I think competition was always a big deal for me, and so that competition and competing and trying to be a winner all the time was kind of useful. Um, not that I was really a great athlete or anything like that. I was actually a very average, but the desire to win and all those types of things were always certainly there. So I think that was kind of useful uh, in in um, in my success as an adult. Was I want to win? I want to go win. Everything I do, I want to win. So, maybe if you play games as a kid, that those even that you want to win, right? It's a game. You're trying to win the game. So, um, I think that those maybe those types of desires they don't go away. You sort of flame them and grow them as a kid, and then um, they help as an adult.
Right, right. Kind of transfer that competitive spirit into kind of winning in business, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Craig, I'd love to maybe wrap up our conversation with a bit of a more introspective question for you. And curious, knowing what you know now, if you were sitting in a room with your younger self in your first ever leadership role, is there any advice you would give yourself?
All the advice that I've already been talking about, right? Eat the frog. I mean, all those things. You wish you knew those immediately, right? It takes time to build, who you are. So, uh, geez, what would I tell my younger self? I think be patient. I like one item that I tell everybody that, how do you get to CEO? How do you get from being just an engineer that got hired out of college at 22 and then become a CEO? And really, I'm and this maybe I'm an anomaly. I don't know, but I think um, just go do your best every day. Go work hard every single day. Don't worry about whether you're going to get promoted or not. But when things come up, then you jump on it, right? When somebody offers you something, you don't turn it down. You go say, "Yeah, this is a great learning opportunity for me," and go do it. And I think yeah, even that I can't say that I would have taught myself that because I did that. I think that's how I made it through my career is I worked really hard every day trying to do the best I could. And when somebody offered me spot to go do it. Yeah, I never even thought about it. It was like, that's such an honor that you're asking me to take on this next responsibility. And so I just took it on. And it just helped me grow my career, I think, tremendously. So yeah, I mean, I did that, so I can't say I would tell my younger self that, but I would tell any young person, "Go work hard. Just go. Don't worry about getting promoted." And if that's what you're worried about, getting promoted, then you're worrying about the wrong stuff. Worry about the task that you have to get done.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing how sometimes those things, at the time, and speaking from my experience, was chasing one promotion and more responsibilities on the title, and obviously as an entrepreneur, it's been a while since I've been in that world,
Yeah.
but you just come to realize that that's not what's important, right?
No, no, not at all. Actually, it can backfire on you. One time in my career, I said, "This is the position I want. I want to go after that. How do I get there?" One time I did that, and it was the worst. That was the worst mistake I ever made. Was saying, "I want this position. And tell me how to get there." And I listened, and it really backfired. It's just
Careful what
better
you
to
wish
do
for.
your job every day, and things open up. It's amazing how things become available and open up, and you just and then you say, "Yeah, I'll go do that," you know? But trying to get to a position is for me, it was the biggest mistake I ever made in my life was trying to get to this position, and that it backfired horribly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's sounds like an important lesson learned,
Yes.
and Um, you know, as we wrap up the conversation today, if listeners want to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in touch?
Probably LinkedIn, right? I pretty much connect with anybody that gets me on LinkedIn. It's business appropriate, right? So I think um, that's probably best.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you, Craig. I really appreciate everything we talked about today.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. It was quite enjoyable.
Thank you. And, thank you too to everyone that's listening. I know I loved hearing so much of what Craig shared, from how he built credibility and this massive growth in new verticals, hearing more about his people first leadership style and the impact that that's had. So, if today's episode gave you any valuable insights, and I'm sure that it did, please share this episode with someone. We know that sharing this kind of knowledge and information helps us all grow as leaders and helps us drive successful organizational transformation and for ourselves as leaders. So thank you again, Craig. And this has been another wonderful conversation on Shift and Thrive. I'll see you all next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.